Have you ever noticed yourself reacting in a certain way to your child's behaviour, felt ashamed, and then thought to yourself, where on earth did that come from? Many of us have triggers from our past that influence how we behave as parents, and I've always felt that having an awareness of their origins is an important starting point in any healing. After all, you want to be present for your kids as the best you, right? Today's guest, a mother of 3, Laura Linklater, is a cycle breaker parent mentor who has been there, having been brought up in a household with alcoholism. You'll hear Laura talk about many topics, including seeing your child as your awakener, the importance of having a connection with your child, her collaborative problem-solve method. Laura shares loads of great tips and insights in this episode to help parents break their cycles so that they can support their children to flourish. I'm infant massage instructor Helen Thompson. Hello and welcome to First Time Mums Chat. Being a parent for the first time is challenging and changes your life in every way imaginable. To help ease your transition into parenthood, I aim to offer supportive, holistic approaches and insights for mums of babies aged 4 weeks to 10 months old. My goal is to assist you to become the most confident parent you can and smooth out the bumps along the way. This podcast is brought to you by My Baby Massage, so let's do this together. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please contact a medical practitioner if you are concerned or have any medical issues. Hi Laura, and welcome to First Time Mums Chat. I'm delighted to have you here. When we first chatted, you told me all about your childhood and how you changed all that into a positive to help mums. So can you tell me what your business is all about and what you're passionate about?
Yes, thank you so much, Helen, for having me. And our chat the other day was so lovely. So I'm very excited about this podcast. So my name is Laura Linklater, and I call it a cycle breaker parent mentor, which sounds like a mouthful. So basically I support parents who are wanting to break cycles. So they had their own tough upbringing. And I use the term tough upbringing because it covers so much ground. Some people have had real capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma, and some people have grown up with abuse or neglect or very complicated household family breakdown, and we talk about that in sort of therapy and academic circles as adverse childhood experiences. So they've had some really, really tough things. And other people that I work with, other parents, there's no just about it, but they want to break the cycle of the older style of parenting of children must be seen and not heard, and you must do as you're told. And we talk about it now a lot, and I'm seeing it more and more, and it's wonderful. Children having big feelings, because that's really what it is. They're becoming overwhelmed by lots of stimulation or what's going on inside of them, and it comes out, and it might come out through shouting or crying. And certainly when I grew up, and I was born in 1984, so the 80s and 90s parenting was very much like, I think what's that term, the screaming abdabs. So I posted about that on Facebook the other day in a post, and a whole host of people commented underneath of, oh yes, wow. I remember that was a tantrum. It was dismissed, and you were picked up and carried away and told never to do it again. And a lot of people maybe had, yes, a little bit tough upbringings, but also they just want to break the cycle and parent in that gentle, conscious way and do it a bit differently.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's who I support.
Yeah, because I was actually born in the 60s, and my grandfather was very much of the era children are seen and not heard. After a certain period of time, the children went to bed. And that was it. They weren't meant to come down, and they weren't meant to be heard of again. Whereas my parents were slightly different to that.
That was of its time. Often when I work with people now, and we will talk about, I always say it's healing plus skills is the parent that you want to be. That's how we get, because a lot of people come to me and they say, I want the skills. I want to know how to get them to put their shoes on without fighting. I want to know how to get out of the door to get to school or wherever on time. I want to know how to get them to brush their teeth when they don't want to. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable. There are loads of skills and sort of tricks that we can do, and they are useful to a point. But if we are just learning things to make our children comply with our wishes, that to me feels more like management. Yeah, but we can use those exact same techniques, because I do teach them. We can use those exact same techniques in conjunction with healing. So it's our own healing from our stories of the things that we have carried with us. If children have been taught, so say, you know, I'm working with a parent whose parents were abusive or were neglectful or never listened to their opinion ever, and they felt very managed, then that parent who then goes in and does some healing, and we talk about the stories that comes out of I'm not loved, or nobody's coming, or nobody cares what I have to say. It's amazing the amount of people that I work with who then, after we've done all of the parenting stuff, they say, do you know, actually, the job that I do now, I'm kind of realizing that I'm doing it because I was pleasing my dad or pleasing my mom or auntie. And then they go on to actually in their own life, so outside of the parenting sphere, because of course we're not only parents, we are whole rounded human beings.
Exactly.
And they will start saying, actually, I really want to do this, or actually, I really want to do this, or, you know, I'm going to go back and take up pottery because I always wanted to do that. And the reason is that the way that we were treated in our childhoods hugely affects who we are at the point where we become parents. So the healing doesn't necessarily mean, you know, I have lots of wounds, I had an awful upbringing, but it means kind of coming to peace with who we are and the skills. And when we put those two together, we have powerful family relationships.
So how do you empower parents to do what you've just said? What would be an example of how you would support parents in what you've just talked about?
That's such a great word, isn't it? Empower. That's what it is. That is exactly what it is. Because interestingly, a lot of people, and I'm a parent of 3, I should say, my children are 6, 4 and 3 right now. I'm at the coalface as well, and wow, what an awakening it is to have children. You really do learn a lot about yourself.
Oh yeah,
there's all of these memes and things that go around the internet that say you should sort yourself out and heal yourself before you have children so you don't pass it on. And I kind of thought I had and then I had children, and then you realize it's not that easy. And they are Dr. Shefali Sabri, she's incredible, the key proponent of conscious parenting. She talks about children as our awakeners, as our mirrors. And it's a good way of seeing that, as opposed to, so I guess one of the things that I do is I help people see it in that paradigm shift. It's not so adversarial, like kids are set up to manipulate me. You probably will have heard that with working with first-time mums, like they're manipulating you when they cry, they've got you wrapped around their little finger, that kind of thing. We take in these stories from society. If your relationship with your child is based on children push buttons, children are manipulative, you're going to respond in that adversarial way where you're going to try and control
absolutely
them.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
But when we see it as my child is my awakener, my child shows me the areas that I have to be healed, my child shows me where I get to love myself a bit more, that's a completely different relationship. And we can approach their behavior, their outward signs of their inner life, which might be crying, it might be sitting on the floor in the supermarket and screaming, which honestly we have all had.
Absolutely.
And we can see that we respond in a completely different way when we're in that paradigm of my child has big feelings and they are my awakener, so how can I support my child in this place, as opposed to, oh, how can I control my child and make them stop doing this? Of course,
yes, I think that controlling is a very powerful one, because I think from my childcare background, when I first started in childcare, when in the 1980s, it was very like that. If we had a behavioral problem child, it wasn't so much about the controlling, it was how we can help that child. But if they got out of hand, they went to a special school and that was it. What I'm trying to get at with what you've just said is, I think nowadays people respect the child's feelings. They respect more of where they're at. And they think, as you've just said, how can we support this child? and how can we support ourselves, because we obviously can't get on burnout. So there's got to be a balance between the child, and there's got to be a balance between the parent, because you don't want to pull too much at the child and be too aggro with the child, because they've got a behavior problem or dyslexia or whatever it is, it's just going to make it worse.
My daughter is just going through her dyslexia assessment, and I have learned, as a teacher and a mom, and as somebody who has worked with families for 15 odd years now, I've had to learn the hard way how far to encourage, and then when it tips into pushing, and because each of my 3 children has a very different threshold. One of my children, he loves it when I offer more and more and more and more, and he loves it. And we home educate, I should say, and travel the world. So I'm actually beaming to you from Vietnam right now, and he loves it. And the other one, the second she smells me pushing her, she backs off. And each
but
child
that's
is different.
good, and I think it's good that each child is different, and I think that's something that mums have to realize. My father was a teacher, and I think I learned a lot from him. I was very close to him, and I think I was a mirror to him. And my mother didn't know how to handle me. He understood exactly where I was coming from, and he understood my learning problems, learning difficulties when it came to study, and he supported me so much. He gave me so many tips, like what you're saying, to help with those things.
It's interesting. You see, obviously people can't see me, but I have this huge smile on my face, because you have spoken about what it's like to be understood, to be seen and to be heard, and to know my parent gets me. And that is such a precious feeling. And so many of us, even as adults, we go through life looking for that. And this is why, just before we came online, I started recording. So I'm dyslexic, so I dictate my book. So I'm writing a book right now, an ebook, and it's all about being connected with your children, because so many people say, oh, can you help me with this skill? Can you help me get them ready on time? I want to stop shouting. What do we do? And my answer is always the same: go back to connection. Always go back to connection. Because if you're not connected with a child, a very, very simple ask of them is probably going to be thrown back in your face. But if you are very connected, and then you say, oh, I've just realized the time, can you get your shoes on, please? They are so much more likely to do it. Because it's almost smoke and mirrors.
It's a connection.
Yeah, I'm a former teacher. I was a primary school teacher in the UK, and I did lectures on behavior management, and it's called behavior management. And that vocabulary is so telling, because it's like, how do I effectively manipulate? And I was taught some very, very, I say that they are devastatingly effective techniques for making kids do what I wanted them to do.
Yeah, but there are certain tasks that kids need to do, like you're in a rush and you've got to get them to clean their teeth and put the shoes on and get their socks on and do all that kind of thing. Yes, I agree with you, but it's how you do that. And that's what you're saying.
It's how, yes. And I think all of us really, because it's only this massive societal cycle is only just being broken now. We were raised in that. Skinner was the psychologist who taught, and he believed, and it was adopted by schools and educators all over the world, he believes that if you used praise and punishment, just like he did in his studies with animals, you could get anybody to do anything you want. He likened the human being, and especially the child, to being an automaton. And you can use praise and rewards and punishment, and they are devastatingly effective. But what you won't have is a child who feels seen and heard and understood, and then thus connected to you.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think it depends on the punishment too. So the praise and rewards are fine, but if you're giving them a reward, you might use a bit of bribery here. I'm just giving an example. You might say something like, we've got to go because I'm meeting somebody, or you've got a dentist appointment, so let's get your shoes on. If you're quick and if you're ready in 5 minutes, you might get an ice cream or something after you've been to the dentist. But you've got to follow that through. If you say you're going to give them a reward, you need to give them that reward as well.
Yes.
But the punishment side,
if we're not honest, then they know.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that's the key to that. But the punishment side, if they consistently don't do what you say you're going to do, you say, well, the punishment to me, please tell me if you think of a different one, but the punishment to me would be that they wouldn't get the reward. They wouldn't get the reward, or they wouldn't get the punishment.
I actually advocate, and I raise my children as well, we don't use and have never used any punishments. Now, that doesn't mean that my kids get to do whatever they like, because they don't. Say your example, I will call that a pinch point. Say there was something that they consistently don't do. Now we have an option there, because this is another common thing, and it's usually around brushing teeth and bedtime. Almost always brushing teeth and bedtime pop up regularly, because everybody struggles with those, especially if you have multiple children. It sometimes makes your head explode. So we have a choice when they are refusing to do something, because that's normally what it is, whether it's digging the heels in and saying, no, I'm not doing it, or whether it's going a bit silly around it and dodging it in that way. We have the choice where we become the parent who says, do as I say, at cost of our relationship with our child to a point. We can shout and they will probably do it. We can scare them and they will probably do it.
Yeah,
we can
but that's
take
not,
the things that they love away from
giving them praise.
And they will probably do it. I actually teach something, I'll probably talk about this in a bit. It's called the collaborative problem solve. And I've done this with children as young as 3. It's a way of sitting and saying, okay, so we have a thing, a pinch point, a repeated conflict area. We have a pinch point here, and then you go through its 5 steps of how to work out what the issue is with the child. So you speak and they speak, and then you come up with the many different ways of how to solve it with the child. And so the first stage is you just write out everything they say, everything without editing. So I remember doing this with my child, and one of them was, she had a baby brother at that point, put brother in the bin. Okay, fine. I just wrote it down, no editing. And then another one was, I think one of their solutions was, go in a spaceship. Okay, we'll write it down. And then after the next stage, that's the 4th stage, is to sit, and then we weed through, we change pens and we say, can we really do that? And then I had my opportunity to say, I actually really love your brother, and I don't think he would like being put in the bin. Oh no, actually we shouldn't do that. And she agreed with me. And then we came down with, and clearly I steered it, and we came down with something, it might well have been one of my suggestions, a way that I had come up with, but it was part of the whole conversation that we could solve our problem. And then the 5th is that we made a commitment to do it, and the problem disappeared.
Yeah.
And she was 3 years old at that time.
But if you have,
and yes, it took me an hour.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got to give yourself time, extra time. And I think that's the key to mums. That's a good point, because if you're going to do it that way, which is the best way to do it, say if you've got an appointment at 3 o'clock, you start preparing your child to leave at 1:30.
Yes, it's true. For me to get out of the door at 8:30, I start at 7:30. And I have everything lined up, because I have 3 children as well. It's all lined up the night before.
You've got to sort of plan it ahead. And I know that's frustrating, and I know it's hard work, but
I'm so tired.
It does work in the long run. If you start when they're 3 years old, it works in the long run, because then you can say, right, well, you have 2 choices. Either you get your shoes on now, because if they've learned when they're 3, and when they get to 5, they'll know what you're talking about, and they'll know that you respect them, and they'll know that you care for them.
It's almost like you build up the currency, isn't it? I should say as well, before I move on, that collaborative problem solve, I did that about 2 days after the last explosion, because in the time, that is not the time to do it, just so that people don't then try and kind of replicate that. I had my friend take our baby out for a walk then. That's when I had 2. So that it was just me and her in this bubble, and it was very, very lovely. But if you treat them with the gentle parenting and the conscious parenting, as being aware of, I'm having a bad day and I snapped, that's okay. I now get to look after myself. I'm going to go to bed early, or I'm going to go for a walk later when I can.
And you share that with the child.
Yes, exactly. I use EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom technique, which you might have seen. It's where people tap on their faces.
Yes, I have seen that.
My kids see me do that all the time. I'll come home and I'll say, okay, mummy is feeling quite stressed out because that was really a bit upsetting and it didn't go according to plan. Mummy needs 5 minutes and then we can talk about it. And then they will see me go into the kitchen, put the kettle on and do a quick tap whilst it boils. And so I'm not hiding the fact that I've had a tough time. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm so angry important. Or anxious. And the other day, my 4-year-old said, Mummy, we have it on an app. Mummy, can I do the sibling annoying one? Because there's one of the meditations for frustration with siblings. And he actually asked if he could do it. And I could see him, he was tapping on his eyebrows and he was like, Bear is really annoying me. But they've learned that from seeing it, but they must see it. So us being transparent with our tough days, Doesn't mean having a breakdown in front of them. We're allowed to, but if you're going to have a real human meltdown moment, it's usually best to, give the children to partner or a friend. But showing that you're human.
Yes.
That's one of the greatest gifts we can give. Yeah.
That's right. It gives them the respect to know that they can show their emotions and express themselves, because, yeah. So and I think it teaches them to come up to you and say, look, I'm having a bit of a tough day now, or I'm angry. And it's the same with a 2-year-old when they're having a temper tantrum. Don't try and intervene at the time. Just sit with them gently and let them rant, and just say, look, I'm going into the next room right now, and I'll come back in 5 or 10 minutes. Just allow them the space to calm down.
Yeah, because we call that holding space. And it's one of the hardest things to do, because when your baby is upset, and I didn't truly understand this so much, because I found it very easy, well, maybe not easy peasy, but it came more easily to me when I was a teacher, because they weren't my children.
Yes.
Now, when my children have their big meltdowns, I'm the mama bear. I'm like, I have to fix it.
Yes,
and actually, I can't fix it. And it's not our jobs. It's our jobs to support them through their big feelings.
Yes, that's the key.
And we can't change it. We can be there and arm them with the emotional skills and knowing that we love them, that they need to get through life. And it's tough. And that's why I always talk about healing, about how we get to look after ourselves. And when we look after ourselves, we can be there for these sometimes huge and can be distressing to have a 3-year-old scream and shout at you. Well, it is.
Oh yeah, of course it can. It's a very good point you said. If it's your own child, it's a very different experience. You can't hand them back. You've got to sit down and work it out together. Whereas if you're a teacher or a childcare worker or educator, you can hand them back.
And it's going to end, so it's okay, because it might be the next 2 hours is tough, but when it's 1 in the morning and
or as a teacher or a childcare educator, you can say to the mum, look, would you like me to take the child away? Would you like me to sit in the room while you go outside and do your tapping or do your diffusion or whatever you need to do? I can be here to support your child while you do that. So you're giving the mum that support to be able to do what they need to do. And sometimes mums don't have that, and that's tough. So I think they've just got to walk away and know that the child is safe and that the child is going to be okay, and just walk away and do what you need to do and just calm yourself down. I know it's hard, easier said than done, as you've just said.
Yeah, exactly. I found this personally and with clients when I work with them, that the quality of how we show up for our children is directly related to how much we look after ourselves. And we know this, like when we're tired, we snap. Even before having children, when we were tired, we would snap.
You snap.
At this point in life, especially when you have very small children, and if you're a first time mom, you've never done it before, we are at our physical lowest, having given birth, however that happened. We are, as tired as we're ever going to be in our entire life. And we are also holding ourselves to the highest standards that we have ever held. And we can't do it. We just can't do it. But what we can do is our best. I like to think of it as like, that 80-20 rule. If 80% of the time we're gentle and we're conscious and we're looking after ourselves and we're looking after them, and then 20% of the time we just snap and say, do you know what, just do it. That's okay.
Yes, and that's perfectly okay.
And actually, it's good for them to see, I don't have to be 100% perfect all the time. Because if we are, then they must be.
Yes.
Because they won't always have the big feelings, but they won't share it with us if we never show humanity to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think it's a huge part of the human condition to lose it sometimes, to be really tired sometimes.
And I think that's a key point. I think kids have got to see you as who you are.
We call that
colours.
In conscious parenting, we call that radical compassion.
Yeah.
And it is radical. It's a radical act to say, I did my best today, and my best today included snapping at my children and walking away. And actually, some days that's your best, and other days your best is giving them a hug and doing it all kind of textbook. Oh, this feels great. I feel like an empowered parent. Somebody asked me the other day, I'm having a migraine and I haven't talked to my children. Am I an awful mom? And I said, okay, I am a parenting mentor. I do this for a living. My 3 kids spent a whole day watching TV the other day because I had a migraine. And I don't feel bad about that, because I had a migraine. And that was the best that I could do. It was to keep them safe, to keep them fed, and to lie in a different room with a towel on my head. It probably happens once a year. They're going to be okay.
And as I said, it always goes back to that respect, because if you respect your children in that way and share what you're feeling, you're teaching them the respect, and you're teaching them to share your feelings. So when they get to teenage, they'll know.
And for a moment, just to pause, because I work mostly with cycle breaker parents, this is where the healing comes in. If you weren't shown that respect as a child, you get to learn to treat yourself with love and respect and radical compassion, so that you can then pass that on to your children. And that is harder. Clearly, it's harder than if you grew up being shown love and respect and having your feelings nurtured and looked after. And so for the cycle breaker parent, this is why I decided to specialize in that area. I grew up in a home with an alcoholic father who was sometimes very loving when he was in a good place, and sometimes he was really quite scary, and you never knew which one you were going to get. And as a child, you don't understand alcoholism when you're 7.
No, of course you don't.
How would you? You just know dad is scary, or I did something wrong, but a few days ago I did that and that was right. And so as a parent, some things would always, I guess, set me off. I always talk about it as pushing the ball. I have this analogy. It's called the ball in the box analogy, where there's a big red button and then there's a tennis ball. And originally it was for grief, and it's just amazing. It's good for that too, that the behavior of your children and your life is the ball bouncing around the box, and every now and then it's going to land on this big red button, and then it will set you off and you will explode, or grief will overtake you, or you will feel anger or scared. And for me, it used to be shouting, because when my dad was drunk, he would shout
at you. Yes.
So then I didn't understand. It took me a while, and this is why I became a parenting mentor when I left the classroom when I had children, as I couldn't work with 3 children or that childcare juggle. And then when I was ready to go back into the world of out of the home paid work, I decided I wanted to use what I had learned through my master's education, childcare, my childcare qualifications, and also my real life of realizing when my then 3-year-old would shout at me, I would have this huge response, and I didn't understand where it came from. And through doing my own healing, I realized it was this wound, that big red button. When we say the kids push my buttons, well, they don't know the buttons are there. The buttons are inside us. So when we heal that button, which for me looked like a lot of inner child healing, it looked like making sense of my dad's story, because I now see him as a human being who had demons, who succumbed to addiction, whereas I used to see him as the big monster of my childhood. And that reframe, that we would call that forming a coherent narrative, is monumental in the way it looks. And once I had done that, and then learned skills like tapping for me, of how to release my fear and upset and worry, all of those feelings that I had as a child when my kids shouted at me, because my brain was saying, like, yelling, scary, yelling, get away, get away. So I would shut it down as quickly. Sometimes I would shout at them, or I would just walk away. And then once I had done the healing, I didn't need any skills. I didn't need any whistles or bells or things to say. It just didn't affect me so much. And I could say, oh, you're really upset. And then, go into the parenting mode, because that trigger, that big red button, it had evaporated because I had done the healing work. It's very nuanced, and it's so much more beneath the surface than we realize, particularly when we first become parents.
You were talking at the beginning about a mirror.
Yes.
And I think that's sort of what you're saying. When you first became a parent, you were mirroring what you'd seen as a child. You saw your child, and then you had a mirror, and you were experiencing in your brain what you'd experienced as a child. You had to sort of get rid of that mirror in between.
Yes, because that is how the brain keeps us safe. Well, the mind, it's the mind keeping us safe and saying, oh, okay, the last time somebody yelled at you like that and completely let it go and unleashed their anger at you, it was terrifying. Get away, get away, get away. But actually, I was 32 by then. I didn't need to run away. I needed to meet my child's needs. So by meeting my needs for my healing, yes, it was an investment. Yes, it was a few hours. I have a good friend who's a hypnotherapist. So I went to see her, and I did what I now do with my journey. I do that with my clients. And then they find, yes, the skills are very important, and yes, they are useful. The healing is the foundation, and it makes you feel just in such a better place. in general. You sleep better and you look after yourself more because you realize that you're worthy of love and feeling good. And taking responsibility, saying, okay, I'll raise my voice at my kids. Okay, so that wasn't ideal. That's okay, I'm still a good person. When you have healed those wounds, the radical responsibility and radical compassion go hand in hand for conscious parenting. And the responsibility doesn't mean beating yourself up. It just means saying, okay, that wasn't ideal. I'm going to treat myself with compassion, go and have a bath, go for a walk, go and see a friend. And the next time I'm going to use this skill that I read in a book, or this thing that Laura taught me, or this thing that I heard Helen say on a podcast. That is the radical compassion and radical responsibility. And it is a much nicer way to live.
I can relate to that, especially as you've experienced it yourself. You understand the mirror concept, and I think sharing that with parents, because you've gone through it, it's very empowering because you've experienced it yourself. It's easier for you to give that to somebody else, to share that, and it's through your own experience.
I guess in a way, people say this all the time, and I don't think I really understood it before. Like, I am doing for others what I kind of needed when I first became a parent. That gap of where I didn't know where to go forwards. And all of this stuff will help all parents all over the world, no matter, you know, how old they are or what background, but specifically people with the tough childhoods. It's so powerful. And I found my way through it, and it took me a few years. And now I do a 6-week program, and it doesn't heal everything, but it's 6 weeks, and it's almost like a reset. People, you know, they say, oh, it's a reset, I feel completely different. And it's just a few foundational core areas to look at. It's a paradigm shift. That sounds like a big word, but it really, really is. And it starts inside us.
It's good. I've enjoyed finding out more about it, because I've never thought of it in a way that you've just shared. And as I said, you've experienced it, so you've got the tools in your toolbox.
Sometimes it's a parenting tool, like literally how we parent our kids. And sometimes it's a stress management tool. And sometimes it's a how to love ourselves tool. So often we're like, how do I help my kid? How do I help my kid? How do I help my kid? And actually, it's about us as whole people and our family as a whole unit. It's not just the child behaviour, which is why that whole thing of teaching behaviour management. Of course, I understand why, as a former teacher and educator. If we teach behaviour management as a bubble, it's the bubble of just managing the behaviour. It might work to a point, but the child is more than the sum of its behaviour.
Of course.
It really, really bears pulling out that our best is going to look different on different days. Sometimes our best is managing to not shout at our children, or managing not to flip our brains. And that is okay if that on that day is your best. And some days your best is looking like a TV mom, you know, or a TV dad. And then because you're in a good place, because you've had a good night's sleep, because you've eaten some good food a few days before, because you're feeling particularly free of stress or whatever it is. And actually, we don't have to have this ridiculously high bar that the media and community set. We don't have to reach that bar every day. And we are not failures if we didn't reach it. And everything is a learning experience. So if you feel like you haven't had a great day with your kids, take it as a learning experience. And I know that sounds easier said than done, and it is. That's why I say it's a paradigm shift, because it's a change. And actually that is radical when we think of how society treats us. You're either the best you can be or you fail. And actually it's not true. I had a really good day. Oh, what can I take from that and use again? Or, okay, I had a tough day today. What can I do next time? How can I love myself? Because the more we look after ourselves as parents, as humans, the more easily it is to show up in a gentle, compassionate way with our children. So I guess it's just look after yourself, really.
Yeah,
because it's not self-care, it's not a buzzword, it's the foundation of your parenting relationship.
And failure is not an option. I did a personal development course, and simply, if you can't do something, you think of a way that you can do it. You think, okay, well, I can't do this today, but how can I do something different tomorrow? How can I achieve what I wanted to achieve tomorrow in a different way?
When I think now of how, on a good day, how I spin a million plates with 3 children and all their big feelings and all their needs and the admin and life, I could not have done that with my one child when I had one baby. I could not have done it because I didn't know. It was a new world. But what I did with my one baby when I had one was, when I look back on it, amazing, because I'd never done it before. it does get easier because you learn skills, and wherever you are right now, you're doing great.
Yes. So Laura, thank you for all your pearls of wisdom. I've really appreciated talking to you. So if somebody wanted to find out more about your wonderful way of parenting, how can they find out about you?
The first place I send people is to my Facebook group, which is called Cycle Breaker Parents Unite, because that's kind of where I put everything. So everything happens in that group, and I go live every Wednesday. I do the Wednesday workshop, which is a free half-an-hour workshop for everybody, because I know not everybody has enough money or time or is emotionally there to go for the big coaching. But you're always welcome, and there's all kinds of freebies and things. And also my website is cyclebreakerparents.com and that has all of the things. My biggest thing right now is the conscious parenting toolbox. It's good because we've used the word toolbox so many times, and it's 21 days of 10-minute lessons or sessions delivered to your phone or to your email, and it's audio, and you can read it if you have a child asleep on you, or you can put one earbud in whilst you're doing the washing up. And of course I do one-to-one coaching. That's an option if you want to go deeper. And sometimes if you have that tough upbringing, to break the cycle, having somebody hold your hand is what you need and is powerful.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I definitely look forward to looking at your Facebook group and checking it out.
Yeah, so you're welcome.
Thank you for your time. It's much appreciated.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Wow, Laura certainly shared some great ideas, and I hope you find her tips and insights as helpful as I did. I really find Laura's passion for helping parents break the cycles motivating and uplifting. I highly recommend checking out Laura's Facebook group, and I've included links in the show notes at mybabymassage.net/podcast/055. Please help me spread the word to other mums by rating and reviewing my podcast on Apple Podcasts. This helps me support more mums just like you for a smooth journey into the exciting world of parenthood. I am really passionate about First Time Mums Chat and providing a weekly resource that helps parents who are new to the whole world of parenting, and I want to hear from you. I warmly welcome questions and feedback and comments on my podcast episodes. I am always on the lookout to interview mums who are doing amazing things. Is your little one suffering from colic or constipation? I may have just the thing to help you experience less crying, less stress, and have a happier, more contented little one and household. Just go to mybabymassage.net/colic to get your free colic remedies cheat sheet. Start soothing your baby and get some much needed rest, and build a deeper bond with your baby that grows stronger every day. That's mybabymassage.net/colic. So please reach out by sending me an email at support@mybabymassage.net. And once again, thank you so much for listening.